All right, thank you everybody for joining us today. As you may know, my name is Nick Hirschon. I'm a journalism professor here at William Paterson. I'm the advisor of our campus chapter of the Society of Professional Journalists. And we're excited today to host this panel with reporter and executives from Telemundo. We're a Hispanic serving institution, so these are the sorts of events that are very important for us to have on campus. So we're very grateful to these folks for joining us today. So the way we'll run it today, I'll start by asking some questions, but we want it to be interactive. I'm sure you have a lot of questions about potentially working for Telemundo and just other things about the industry. So any of those times you have something, just feel free to raise your hand. And if the panelists can't hear you, I'll repeat it through the microphone. So we have here joining us today, starting at my far right, David Rodriguez, Telemundo's 5 p.m. news anchor and lead investigative reporter. In the middle there is Human Resources Manager Ana Abreu. And then to my near right, we have Vice President John Gonzalez, who is a 1995 William Paterson alum. So we're very proud, and thanks for coming back. Welcome back. So if I could just start this conversation for you, I usually, as a college professor and given our audience, like to just ask, what are the kinds of things you did in college that got you to where you are today? That could be courses that you took. It could be certain mentors that you had, practices, working for campus media. But if we could maybe just go down the line, if you could each tell us a little bit about that. And if maybe we could start with you, John, since you're a William Paterson alum yourself.
It's interesting because where I am today is not necessarily where I had planned to be in my career. I started out my career wanting to be in what I went to school for here, to be a photographer, an E&G news photographer in the street in New York. And so at that point in time, I mean, the furthest thing from my mind would be that I would be in management. So had I known that back then, and it's one of the things I always tell people, it's like, just take every opportunity that you have in front of you, because where you think you are going to be may not necessarily be where you will be. But going back and answering your question directly, because I was really into photojournalism, a lot of the classes that I took, obviously in this building, but a lot of stuff that I did was I was really involved with still photography. Still photography for me made a huge, huge impact in my career and in my personal life. To this day, I'm an avid still photographer. And so looking at what I wanted to achieve in my career, where I wanted to go, I still say the same thing. In order for you to be an E&G photographer, I think you've got to be a really good still photographer first. So a lot of the stuff I did here revolved around that.
That's wonderful. I want to get more into some of your experiences with William Paterson, of course, but we'll go down the line. So Ana.
Yeah, so I am in the human resource function, and that exists in any industry. So I didn't really see myself in media, but I landed here. And I did something similar to John G. I made sure that I did things that would get me to where I wanted to be in my career, and that was getting as much experience as possible. So wherever I was, whether it was an admin assistant at a hotel or working retail, I always went towards that people management, the talking to people, getting that HR experience. So by the time that I was ready to, finish college and start applying for jobs, I was able to go onto my resume and say, yes, I have had, interpersonal skills, I have interviewed, I have done so on and so forth. So at the time came and Telemundo was looking for a bilingual HR coordinator, I was able to sit down and say, yes, look at everything that I've done, and this is why I'm ready to be here. So yes, that's HR, but when it goes into media, I think you can all do the same thing. And John held some things back on what he used to do, like going out and shooting for Univision. He'll talk about that later. But the point is, he did everything he possibly could. So when the job came up, he said, look at all the things that I've done, and I'm not scared to do. Sorry to steal a little bit of your thunder there, but he's got more to share.
And obviously we want to talk today about bilingual skills and how important it is, because we have some people who are maybe only English speakers, some who are native Spanish speakers, and wondering how that all interacts with potential openings at Telemundo. So we'll discuss all of that. But David, yeah, how did you get involved in the industry? What did you do while you were in college?
Well, I born and raised in Puerto Rico. So with that I want to mention that because when I went to first grade, one day something happened at school, and the teacher told me, I think that you will be, someday you will be reporter. Here I am. So that changed my life. Teachers change your life. You have to pay attention to every detail. You have to develop the skills. And also you have to follow your instinct. So when I went to college, started my career as in public communication in the University of Puerto Rico. So after that, I learned and I understood perfectly why she said that back in the years in 1981. So I would share with you more about that story, but I want to mention that because sometimes you want to have a goal in your life, but you have to understand how to navigate and how to follow the guidance, follow your mentor, and sometimes take time, but you have to be focused.
So if I go back to you, John, for a second, and talking about your experience here at William Paterson, graduated in 1995, right? So one of the things that I've noticed as a journalism professor here is that some students dare not dream that they could actually work in the job that they want. They think we're a state school. Quite frankly, we are not necessarily a Columbia or one of the top journalism programs in the country. But someone who came out of William Paterson has succeeded as well as you have. So what would you say to some of those folks who might have that self-doubt about whether they can make it in the industry coming from a William Paterson?
I don't think it matters where, honestly, I don't think it matters where you come from. I think you just have to have the drive, and you have to have the willingness and the fortitude, and just keep sticking your nose in and keep trying, because you're going to get it. I'm going to reverse that for a quick second, because I'm fortunate enough today to be part of the hiring process, right? And I don't really look at schools. I don't. In fact, depending upon the role that I'm hiring for, I don't necessarily look at all of the experience that the person has. I want to look at the drive that the person has. I want to see what the person's done, and I want to make sure that they're hungry for what they want to do. And if all of that clicks, I'm going to hire the person. And I would rather take someone who has a positive drive, a willingness to learn, than somebody who came from an Ivy League school. Ivy League school for me means nothing.
Mm-hmm. I say that often to students, even though I got my master's at Columbia Journalism School, and great institution. I taught there for a few summers, but I often tell them, the same things that I'm teaching you in the William Paterson classroom is what I'm using at Columbia. Right. It's not like, now I've really turned it on because of the Ivy League kids or something. So then, Ana, you're seeing students, I guess, young people in the hiring process. So what are some of the things that you're seeing, either mistakes that students, young people, interns potentially make when they're interviewing with someone like yourself, or what are the positive characteristics that you're seeing that all of these folks should emulate?
Yeah, absolutely. Before I get to that, I do want to echo what John G. said. Yes, education is super important, but what's coming out in an interview is your personality, your drive, and then ultimately you're real. What can you actually do? So we actually have editors, we've had some photogs that started out outside of the country, self-taught, then came to the United States, then they did, their education, and they've been able to apply and get hired with us. So at the end of the day, it really is that work ethic and what you can bring to the table and provide, and I think your work is your proof. So keep that in mind. But when it comes to interviews, and I don't want to call them mistakes, what is it happy accidents? Is that what it actually is? Bob Ross says happy accidents. I find that if you're not focused on something, then that comes out in the interview process. So I've had interns that apply for the newsroom, and then they'd say, but I really like entertainment and sports. So that starts contradicting. Do you want to be in the newsroom? Because hard news is difficult. It's not something that you just come in to do. You really need to have a passion for it, and you need to be mentally prepared to be in that newsroom when news is tough. Like this Friday, the man that lit himself, right, outside of the court, that's difficult. If you're not in that mentality to be in and listening to these updates and calling for NYP and talking to David and giving him updates while he's on air, that's not really going to be a fit. So I'd say go focused. If that's not really where your passion and your heart is, then let's think about something else. There are a lot of different opportunities and a lot of ways to get experience, but you want to make sure that you are laser focused on what you want to do. And then on the opposite side, where I see that there's positives, I really love when candidates come in and they're prepared to ask questions, when they have a little bit of history of, the station. We are a duopoly, so Telemundo works hand in hand with WNBC and vice versa. So I really like when people bring in tidbits from either side of the river. We say that because Telemundo is in Fort Lee and WNBC is at 30 Rock. So I like to see that there's a little bit of background research and that they really want to be there. That we have hundreds of candidates that apply for the internship process. So we want to make sure that we're giving the experience to somebody that absolutely wants to be there.
And you mentioned the idea of a reel. So before we get to David, I want to play a little example of some of David's reporting or a promo of David's reporting. So if the guys in the back, Rod, Dante, if you could cue that up for us, we'll play this clip and then we will talk to David.
So cool.
You've seen the fires, you've heard the warnings.
Thursday at 11, the News 4 I-Team and Telemundo 47 Investiga team up to expose the potential dangers of lithium-ion batteries.
When these things start, there is no putting it out.
Thousands of e-bikes with fire risks, putting lives and property in jeopardy. The News 4 I-Team's Chris Glorioso and Telemundo 47 Investiga's David Rodriguez with a warning to keep you safe.
How damaging just one of these cells can cause a dangerous reaction.
Thursday at 11.
So obviously this is a coordinated report that you're doing with NBC. One of the reasons why I chose is because example of that sort of maybe a new style of reporting, that crossbreeding between the relationship between NBC and Telemundo. And also because a lot of students here may only speak English, so they don't know some of your Spanish reporting. They might not be able to understand some of that. But so the importance of being bilingual, as you are, can you speak to how that has informed your report? I mean, there's so many questions I could ask off of that clip and the actual report that you were doing there on the lithium batteries, but being a bilingual reporter in our market in particular, how is that advantaged for you?
It is advantage. And I would tell you, as I mentioned before, born and raised in Puerto Rico. So for me, it was a long way to get here. Because back in the years, 1998, and I have to mention this, I went to this interview. I was applying for a position with the U.S. Department of State. I went to this interview asking for this opportunity in a fellowship program, and they told me, you will not be able to be part of our program because you don't pass your interview. And I say, why? I want that you explain to me. Of course, reporter always ask questions and try to find the reason, right? So they told me because you're English. So what I did the week after that, I went and I joined the army. And I say, I'm sure that I will have the opportunity to learn the language. I'm sure that they will send me to a language center, and that will happen. But why I joined the military service? Because, of course, my dad, he joined army back in 1940 in Bronx, and he was a Second World War veteran. So I want to mention that because it gave me the opportunity. It was a long way, it was a hard way, because honestly, they sent me to Alabama. So you can imagine, different accent, different experience, right? So, but I learned the language. And after that, I went and I applied for the position the year after that, and they sent me to the U.S. Embassy in Madrid, Spain. So I mentioned this because you have to be focused, as Chip also mentioned before. You have to know what you want in your life, and you have to be prepared. As I mentioned, it was the hard way, and I learned the language. I still have my accent, but I try to survive. So I mentioned this because when I'm working in this special report, or with my colleague from NBC, we communicate very well. But it's not about communication. It is about I'm able to see them. I don't even have to talk to them anything because they know what I want to say. That's called chemistry. That is very, very important. Same thing with your photographer, same thing with your coworkers, and John knows very well what I'm talking about. Because sometimes you are in a scene and you want to have that shot or that video, and you have to say something with your eyes. But that is part of the learning process. I'm learning every day. I'm knowing my coworkers every day. So that's key, especially when we're working together in this type of story. Actually, what you saw is a promo about lithium batteries. I will say this is one of the most important investigations that we did last year. Actually, this year in IRE, investigation reporters editor in convention, they will have this opportunity this year in California, and we will be presenting this special report there and explaining to our coworkers naturally how we have been working together in this investigation. In this case, I came with some ideas. My coworkers from NBC came with several ideas. We put everything together. At the end of the day, we have something in Spanish and something in English.
Just to piggyback off on that, because you hit a couple of points for me, just to reiterate, and it's the chemistry and the language in the field. When I was a photog, you're absolutely right. I mean, not day one when you were working with the reporter for the very first time, but typically what ends up happening is you'll go out with a reporter, and then you'll work with that reporter again, and then you'll work with that reporter again. You do build a bond with that reporter as a photographer, and you do build a chemistry. And more often than not, when you know what shots or you know what the reporter's looking for without the reporter even having to tell you, but in certain situations, because of the story, you may not know. All the reporter needs to do is look at you, and you'll know exactly what they want, and you're going to get it. But the other part of that is, because I've been in in these situations too. I've been working in the field with a reporter who did not know Spanish, and we're out doing a story, and we're in the Bronx, and there are certain interviews that we were able to get because I'm fluent in Spanish. So it's important. Now the flip to that, I also want to point out, and it's not to discourage folks who don't speak Spanish, is some of my best directors, and so, I don't know how they do it, kudos to them, but some of my best directors and some of my best editors on the Telemundo side do not speak a lick of Spanish. They're able to direct a live show, and they're able to edit packages or whatnot, and they're awesome. So, I don't want to discourage anybody either.
Yeah, that was going to be a question I was going to ask, so
Yeah.
I'm glad that you mentioned that. So again, I have a lot of questions, but I want to make sure we have a chance for the students to ask some. So let's open it up. So anyone have a question you'd like to ask to start us off? Yeah, Kaylee.
Hi, my name is Kaylee. I'm a senior now, studying journalism. Well, my first thing isn't a question. You guys just brought me to want to say how I'm from a Dominican household, and we speak broken Spanish at home. So sometimes when I watch the news or I watch professional people talk to me, I'm like, yeah, what do you say? Because the words are too big. So I'm still learning on the professional side, expanding my Spanish to be more wide open, more international, to be able to understand different accents as well. So that's just something I wanted to say. I don't know. But I did have a question on, do you think that the news has changed with the new generation, how we have, TikTok and how we're more fast-paced? Do you think the news has been the same or it has been different? And are you, getting in new talent to be able to get that perspective of, the new generation and Gen Z and their attention span? Or do you feel like it hasn't changed?
I think any one of us could take that.
I'll speak really briefly. I'll let you guys speak. From my point of view, absolutely. In the span of time that I've been in a career, it has changed. I mean, the whole business, forget just the news portion and how we consume news has changed. But specifically, I think in the news business, the way we consume news is drastically different. And I'll speak for my 22-year-old son, who gets all of his news from TikTok, love it or hate it. But that's how it is, and we need to evolve from that. We need to evolve with that.
I actually want to add, because I too come from a Dominican household where we cut words short, where we speak too fast, where we make up words. I mean, every culture makes up their own words, but Dominican slang is special. I also, when I started at Telemundo 6 years ago, I was almost very similar to you, where I spoke what I spoke at home, and that was really all the Spanish I spoke was with my parents. Even with my sister, I only speak English. So coming into Telemundo, where I'm surrounded by these professionals, I don't know if you've seen David reporting, but my goodness, his vocabulary is fantastic. That's what I aspire to be one day. And I too was shocked. I'm like, oh my goodness, I have a lot of learning to do. But as soon as you sit in and you start speaking to people in Spanish and you start flexing that muscle, your vocabulary increases, you get more comfortable, you understand, different words from different countries, the accents. Even the accents sometimes get attached to me. If I sit next to somebody who's Colombian, I will start speaking in a Colombian accent in 2 minutes. It's like, well, I thought you were Dominican. I'm like, well, not at this moment. But going back to your piece about the news changing, absolutely. And it's something that we make sure we mention when we're interviewing, is how are you changing along with the industry as well? It's not just, linear broadcast anymore. It's multi-platform. It's what can you do? Can you go live at our 6 p.m.? Can you do a quick, Instagram story? Can you go on TikTok? So on and so forth. So it's really about becoming versatile at this point. And I'm sure David can talk to us a little bit about that too.
Yes, of course. Let me tell you, I went to college back in 1994. So today, everything is, I would say, different. So with that being said, I want to mention this. Media landscape is changing rapidly. So you have to be prepared for that. So right now, I'm sure that when they're hiring someone in Telemundo, they look at the resume and look for, of course, their experience, but also about sometimes people look for how many followers do you have. And I mentioned that is because especially as a talent, that's one of the things that companies sometimes are looking for. That being said, I want to mention that digital platforms are really important, but also you have to follow standards and legals. So this is not like I receive information saying someone killed the president, and then I can receive the information and someone can say that, but I cannot be the one who go in front of my camera in Facebook and say, this is what I know. You have to confirm the information. I prefer to be the second on air saying something, but have to be clear, sure, and also we have our filters. In the newsroom, you have your filters. I want to mention that because digital platforms are really important, especially media, in what we're doing, but you have to use that very, very carefully. We have a responsibility, and we have to take care of our responsibility. This is something huge. This is not like, I have a microphone in my hand, yes, but I have to be very careful on what I say every day in the afternoon, in the newscast at 5 p.m. When you turn on the TV, I have to be prepared to mention and say everything based on facts, not in opinions. So I want to mention that because, of course, digital platforms are really important for us. Actually, we are doing amazing with digital platform. We've been doing very well in Facebook, YouTube, all the platform. even people have our app, so we're doing very well. People sometimes they're watching us at 5 p.m. using our app, so that's great. But I want to mention that because sometimes we know that everything changing rapidly, but we have to address the situation properly. That's very important.
That's why I cringe when my son comes home and tells me the news that he got from TikTok. I mean, you don't know where your sources are coming from, right? They're in certain cases they may be accurate, but you don't know what the filters were. Hey, just to tie back, where did you get your lithium batteries from? Did you get it from a real source? Did you get it from Etsy, right? One's going to blow up, one's not. So,
yeah, I mean, I want to go back to student question a second, but I was going to ask all of you, just to throw it out there, what makes a Telemundo story? Because we're seeing, obviously, things that affect the community, and that investigative reporting, I feel, is really critical in order to show our worth to the public at a time when journalists are under attack. There's a lot of hostility, questions about journalists become very political. But I feel like if you have those kinds of stories about the lithium batteries, you see there's real value. Like, reporters are fighting for me. They're watchdogs. And besides like the political stuff, they just care about my health, my well-being. So in general, for all of you, what do you think makes a good Telemundo story?
I mean, the only thing I would say, and I'm on the tech side, so I'll leave that to the professionals. For me, it's really about serving your community. There are certain stories that resonate with the Hispanic community. Although, correct me if I'm wrong, on the WNBC side, and we do general assignment, and so do we on the Telemundo side. So a lot of the main stories serve both communities, but we tend to gravitate to what really affects the Hispanics.
Absolutely. I mean, as a duopoly, maybe I will go and work in a story about our community, but maybe people, my colleague from NBC, they have a different angle. We're covering the same story. Maybe we're working a special report about serving how we can provide legal assistance to the migrants. And WNBC, they do the story from different angle. And I will do the story from my perspective of a journalist in Telemundo. Because I know that a lot of the migrants, especially right now in New York, they speak Spanish. So I have to make sure that I serve the community properly. So I have to provide them the information that they need. Sometimes language barrier is a main problem because they don't have access to the information. So I have the responsibility of providing them the information that they need. So and I think that we're not here just for inform or to educate. We're here to help our community. So we have been doing really good in Telemundo. I will tell you, I really appreciate when we go out there and people say, you know what, thank you, because I've been receiving this assistance thanks to Telemundo, because you guys provide information. Actually, we have every day in the afternoon this session that's called Buenas Noticias, good news. So in good news, we always provide information, everything that people need to know in order to do better life here in New York. So that's what I can say.
I hear from so many students that sometimes the reason why they don't watch news is because it's so depressing. And especially in the last few years, right, with COVID and the political situation. So it's nice to hear about the incorporation of good, intentionally saying we're going to have a whole section of the newscast set aside for that. But yes, I want to get to more of your questions and thoughts. So Isabel.
Hi, I'm Isabel, I'm a student here, but also I'm an intern at the NBC Network desk in 30 Rock. And also my mom and her family immigrated from Cuba here in 1968. And since then, when I was young, all of the generation before my mom has either unfortunately passed, or now they're down in Miami. And so unfortunately the language in my household has not been spoken. So I understand some Spanish, but I definitely cannot say that I can speak it. So how do you find that people you hire who may not speak the language end up adapting and can be like, you know, functioning within your newsroom?
Yeah, I mean, our team isn't shy.
Yes.
That's one thing about that newsroom is we go in and out of Spanish. And I say we because I do it as well. I'll be speaking to David in English in a moment, and then I forget the word, so I'll go into Spanish. And it happens all around you. So you start really, you know, understanding some words, and it becomes almost natural. And then especially when you're working in news, there are certain words that don't change. Hit me with some Spanish words for, like, if you're talking to a reporter. Un paquete. Is that how you say?
Yes.
That's a package. Like, you know what they mean because you've heard them
Yes.
20 times in a day. So it starts to click. So the way that John G mentioned, we have directors, editors, some photogs that don't speak a lick of Spanish, but they know all of those keywords because they've been hearing them every single day for the past 10 years. So it's part of their vocabulary at that point. And then I also give kudos to those folks that go above and beyond. I'm going to give a shout out to one of our photographers who's he speaks Farsi, but he also speaks Spanish. So the other day he's outside of my office and he's like, "Hola, ¿cómo tú estás? ¿Y qué vamos a hacer hoy?" with like a Dominican accent. And I look at him like, "Fars, where did you learn that?" He goes, "I go to Washington Heights every day. Of course I learned this." So going above and beyond and, you know, putting in that effort to learn some words here and there goes a long way because then it becomes more natural and you just get kudos from everybody because some people don't expect it and you're like, wow, that was really cool. So
shout out because I'm Cuban too. So just putting that out there. I was born here. My parents came from Cuba in '62, I think it was. So a couple of funny stories, and going back to what you were saying about going between English and Spanish. I grew up in a Spanish-speaking household. My parents did not speak English, so I grew up with that. I'm more comfortable, and I can speak fluent Spanish and I can write Spanish to a certain degree, but I'm more comfortable in English. It's what I technically grew up with in school. Going out on assignment, there was one, it was funny, it was one, and you just do it naturally. There was one instance where I was in a breaking news story and I was running with a camera, yelling at my reporter in English, and then like a switched over to Spanish, switched back over to English. I had a photographer from another station come up to me and goes, "How in the heck did you do that?" I'm like, "I don't know what I did." He goes, "You just went," and I'm like, it was natural. And my career trajectory had me at multiple stations, but I used to work at Univision. So at Univision, we spoke a lot of Spanish. I went from Univision to WNBC and was at WNBC for quite a bit of time, and then went to Telemundo, and then back to now doing both WNBC and Telemundo. But when I went to Telemundo, there was one person specifically at Telemundo who's not there anymore. And she knew that I was Cuban. She knew that I knew how to speak Spanish, yet I always spoke English. She made it a mission. She made it a point to never, ever, ever speak to me in English. I had to speak Spanish because she wanted me to practice my Spanish. And I was like, I was so appreciative of that. And I was pretty cool for somebody to do that. But, you know, you kind of go back and forth and you learn the key words.
And he do very well in Spanish. I will say that.
He does.
Yeah, he do very well in Spanish.
I was at a coffee shop the other day, and same place I go into every day. And I know the person who's there spoke Spanish, but I don't know where he was from. And it was like day after the earthquake, or that Monday after the earthquake, because the earthquake was on Friday. And I said to him, I says, "Oh, where were you know, just chit chat. Oh, did you feel the earthquake? Oh no, I don't really feel it. I didn't feel it." And but that's nothing in my country. We feel that all the time. And so I said to him, "Oh, where are you from?" And he says, "Oh, you know, I'm from Colombia," and blah, blah, blah. So I spoke to him in Spanish, and you saw his eyes just go, it just blew his mind. It's completely blown his mind. He's like, "I had no idea you spoke Spanish." And I was like, "Yeah, I'm Cuban." It was like, it was mind blowing. It was a good experience.
It's a great skill to have and develop, but I've heard from a lot of students that same story as Isabel's, where their parents may have spoken fluent Spanish but didn't really pass it down, and so now they're trying to like regain that skill a little bit. Yeah, you're gonna say something.
I want to share this experience. Before I moved to New York, I was working in Telemundo, Miami. So you can imagine how was that. That is a different world, I will tell you. So when I came to do the casting, it was back in October 2019. I remember, first, in Miami, the director, usually they're Cuban. So all the time what I heard was like, okay, chiquitico, ahora te vas a ir de aquí a allá. That's what I heard. When I came here, my director, he's amazing. He's great. But he gave me an introduction in English. And I was like, okay, how I will survive? Because you have to be ready to read everything in Spanish, but you are receiving your introduction in English. So everything went well. So after that, I went to him and I say, hey, congratulations, because you have been able to give me an introduction in English. You have been doing very well. I really appreciate that. And now he's my director at 5 p.m. I will tell you, I don't even change him. But I want to mention that because sometimes language should not be a barrier. You have to say, here to learn, and every day, if you go there to the newsroom and you are able to learn, let me tell you, you will understand, you will be able to speak. I would tell you, even 20 years ago, 25 years ago, I never imagined to be able to be here in front of you, speaking different language. My first language is Spanish, and you can see because maybe my accent, right? So I'm trying to work my accent right now. So I'm in a working process, but I want to mention that you never give up.
That's great advice. Yeah, let's get some more thoughts from all of you.
So,
This is me.
okay. So hi, I'm an international student. So my question is more, I think, more tricky than Isabel. So what I wanted to ask that I don't know Spanish and English is my second language. So how frequently do you hire the international students? Because apart from the language barrier, I think we have some problems of like visa sponsorship, OPT. So many companies, they just don't want to take us. So how frequent you are to give us the platform?
So it's not impossible for us to hire international students, especially for the intern process. WNBC actually just had a Mexican student. He was doing his master's in, I think also in Colombia, and he might have been on an O1B visa, I believe, and he was able to be hired for the internship experience. On the staff side, it's a little bit more complicated, so the advice I have on that is get started early. We also have actually freelancers that are on visas as well. So our freelance company, it's called Yo, is able to hire them and they're able to work for us. But the sooner you apply and the sooner you disclose, hey, this is the documentation I have, this is the work authorization I have, the better it is for us to, one, get legal involved, get our contractors involved, and see what we can end up doing. So I think it's starting early and disclosing the work authorization. Because unfortunately, we have been in positions where we go through the entire hiring process and we're going to offer a job, and then when they're finally doing their I-9 and doing their verification, we see that they're on a visa that we can't sponsor. And then everybody just wasted their time. We went throughout the whole entire interview process. We had to say no to some candidates for this just to start all over. So it's not good for the candidate and it's not good for the company either.
No, students are generally in F1 visa, so they can apply for the CPT. So,
Yeah, and it's not impossible. It's just making sure you disclose that right at the beginning, so either the recruiter or the hiring manager can do their research on whether it's feasible to hire, whether it's on an internship basis, a freelance basis, or a staff.
So when is the date for, last date for the fall internship?
That's a fantastic question. Our duopoly internship applications are opened now through the 26th. So that is for the full academic year. It starts in September and it goes all the way through April of next year. So please, please, please go on to nbcunicareers.com and look for that internship link. We are getting in candidates now. Sometimes it does close a little bit early if we get a number of candidates, but I spoke to our recruiter last week and it's still going to be open. So if you are interested, make sure you go in and you apply. I've been waiting to say that for the past hour. Thank you for asking.
Shameless plug.
What are some of the things that interns do at Telemundo?
What don't they do? That's a great question. Assignment desk, associate producing, news planning. We have interns that like to go out onto the field and shadow photographers and reporters. That's actually one of my favorite things that the interns do because they get that full, experience. They see what happens out in the field and then how that all works out inside the newsroom, because the perspectives are different. If you've never been out on the field, you think, oh, they're just going out there and they're shooting and they're reporting and then they got to send this, that, and it's not going to be so difficult. But when you're actually out there and you see the work that is really being done, you start to understand, oh, I see now why that pressure is there and why it's, it's quick and move. But our interns do almost everything, and we give a lot of autonomy in that if you've done your assignment and you find that something else interests you in the newsroom, all you have to do is raise your hand and reach out and say, hey, I want to try this. I've been on the assignment desk for 2 months, but I see that news planning is really interesting and I want to do that. And we, 9 times out of 10, say yes, absolutely. And if we say no, it's not right now, let's do it later kind of thing.
Yeah, the fact you're actually getting hands-on experience as opposed to
100%.
getting coffee for folks and all that. Yeah.
Our interns, everybody gets their own coffee. And I actually really love the experience our interns get because, one, we're growing our pipeline. So for us to hire somebody to go get coffee is a waste of resources and a waste of time for everybody. Because when a job opens up, who are we going to look at first? Mm-hmm. It's those interns that have been on that assignment desk or have been in that newsroom for the past 6 to 12 months who know the way WNBC, WNJU work. If we were wasting our time doing something else, then, we're not really helping ourselves.
And John, then on the media production side, because we have some of the students here are journalism, broadcast journalism, but we do obviously have a TV studio where a lot of people working behind the camera, radio station, same sort of thing. So what kind of opportunities are there if you're not necessarily interested in reporting or front facing, but you do want to work behind the scenes?
So and I was going to bring that up. It's a little bit more complicated on the production side, on the field side. It's not impossible. And if there's somebody who really wants to do something, I will figure out a way to make it happen. The one uniqueness that we have, along with, for example, ABC or CBS or a lot of the major stations in New York, is unions. So unfortunately, if you are an aspiring director or you're an aspiring photographer or an editor, it's a little bit difficult for me to bring somebody in and put a camera in their hands and say, hey, go shoot something, because the union will crawl all over me because of why you're taking my job away. It's not impossible, and we've been known to have folks like that. And what we sometimes do is, look, the reporter will go out with the photographer, shoot something, and even on the flip, right? If you're aspiring to be a journalist, you're not going to report because of union situations as well, but they do their story, and then the photog will shoot a stand-up, and we'll let you do something. I will put a camera in somebody's hand or give them video after the fact to edit and practice and get going, and obviously it's not going to hit air, so it's not going to be an issue. It's a little bit more complicated. The reason I bring that up is when I was in school, when I was here, and same thing. I want to intern, right? I want to do something. I want to go at NBC. I want to go at ABC. And somebody pulled me aside and says, you know what? That's great, but you're behind the scenes and you're going to run into this issue. He goes, don't overlook other places. For example, Cablevision, where I used to work, Altice now, or a News 12, where there's not unions. You're going to, behind the scene, be allowed to do more, and you're going to get exposed to everything except, instead of one thing. Mm-hmm. So it's just a tip that I got, and I think it still holds true today.
Yeah, that's very helpful. And David, have you worked with some of these young people, I imagine what are some experiences that you've had with interns, or again, advice that you would have for folks who are applying and then starting as an intern?
First, I always say, this is my legacy, right? What I can do for them, right? So every time when I see students who come to me and ask for advice and ask questions, I always say, I'm here to teach you. Why I say that? Because, of course, we have so many skills in our hands. So I want to make sure if I can do something that they understand how is the real world. Because sometimes in college, you learn about journalism. But when you go out there to the scene, when you go to the field, when you're in a shooting, when you are covering something about political issues, you have to be prepared. It's not only about the story. It's about safety. And John always say this: safety first. So you have to pay attention to everything when you are there. That's something that you learn with practice. That is something that I try to teach to the student. When we go to the field, I try to make them understand that every day is something different. Today I can be in the White House, but tomorrow I can be covering a shooting. And reactions are different, right? So that's something that I always mention when someone comes to me and asks a question, and I want to transmit to them what I've been learning during the process. In my case, I will tell you, military service helped a lot to me in order to be prepared to the coverage. I've been covering hurricanes. I've been in the Hurricane Hunter. I've been in earthquake back in 2010, yes, in Haiti. So, and I will mention, you never underestimate the experience that you have in your life. If you have the opportunity to go to military service, you have the opportunity to serve to your community through a non-profit organization, yes, do that. Because that is part of the experience. I'm sure that at some point when you apply for a position and you go to Ana and John, they will go over your resume and they want to see what is your experience. Even that experience in your community will help to you to get the position.
Well said.
That's wonderful. I know you had a question before and we didn't get to, so yes.
Yeah, it kind of piggybacks off what you were saying, like covering the more negative topics of news. How do you keep yourself from becoming too emotionally invested in these topics and or kind of taking them home with you, like outside of work?
Great question. And everyone have their own formula, let's say. I want to point this. I'm glad because we're in a company where they pay attention to that. Actually, we have ComSci, right? Mm-hmm. And that program where you will be able to talk to professionals. That is very helpful, not only for us as talent, also for the people who are behind the scene. Mm-hmm. Because it's not only about the reporter or the news anchor, it's also about the photographer.
Directors in the control room.
Exactly, with the same, same story. So at some point, does bad news affect us? Yes, we have to find a way. Maybe we have a hobby. We want to do something like where you disconnect. When I go home, let me tell you this, I try to disconnect, and sometimes I don't even watch the news, and I don't watch TV. But why I do that? Because that's my own way to disconnect and make sure that I can be prepared mentally to go the next day and read the news. One of the things that I mentioned before is what I learned in my military career helped to me and prepared to me in order to be a reporter. Why I mention that? Because, we're human beings, but sometimes you have to know how to disconnect. That does not mean that we will not be able to help someone who really needs something, but you have to be strong enough. Another thing, when I have the chance, when I have the opportunity in my vacation, if I can go away far from New York, I do that. My colleagues, they know that because sometimes I share in Instagram my picture, in Asia, in South America. But that's my way. Trying to find opportunity to disconnect, and during that time, I will be honest with you. I delete all the apps with news. Everything related about news, I delete. Why I mention that? Because that's a way for me to take a break, get ready for the next.
It's a great question. There's a common misconception, I think, that the business is glamorous, and I think it's everything but. To your point, you're going to experience stuff. You're going to see things that not everybody does. I kind of equate it to a police officer or an EMS. You're in the middle of certain situations, and I'll speak for myself. You become, and not everybody can, but you kind of become desensitized to things. Again, much like a police officer or a firefighter who has to constantly be exposed to certain things. And it's not just the folks in the field. It's not just the reporter or the photographer experiencing a certain situation. When it's a big story, it goes on, and you go from reporter to reporter to reporter in the control room. So you can imagine you have a reporter, a photographer, a crew in the field experiencing one aspect of it, but then you have an entire control room and a newsroom constantly churning and churning and churning the same thing, and that's sometimes very, very difficult. And there are folks, and we work for a company who's very, very good at it, that has CompPsych and stuff like that. But on your own, I mean, we all manage it differently. We all have, for the most part, hobbies, and we try to disconnect when we're outside of work.
Yeah, and if I could add a little bit to that, it's finding the balance.
Mm-hmm.
So, like John G said, at a certain point, you kind of do get desensitized to it, which is really sad to say. So I think sometimes you have to have a reminder that you are human and that maybe you do need to feel some things. So it's not just, I'm disconnected and what happened. Sometimes you do need to take a step back and feel it, because it'll get to a point where you'll see anything and it's like, it's another day in news, and nobody really wants to live like that. You want to feel the good things and you want to feel the bad things. And when you are feeling the bad things, I want to give kudos to our fantastic management team. They're all very aware of what's going on. So we are continuously sharing resources, the CompPsych, the the EAP, Employee Assistance Program, but also just speaking to your manager and saying, I'm having a tough day. We've had, news personnel come to us and say, I'm not really sure if I can sit in front of this screen and watch this again for the next 4 hours. Help me out. And we find ways, creative solutions to move somebody when they're feeling that bad. But it's just, being humans and taking care of each other. And I'm really proud of our team, because you see people taking care of each other every single day. Absolutely. And even if they're not like raising their hand and saying, I'm feeling it today, somebody else is seeing it, and it's like, hey, let's go get some coffee and let's take a break. And sometimes it is just removing yourself from that newsroom for a little bit and talking to somebody about something else, and then going back into it and going back into the grind, as the kids say these days.
And there are certain things that you just will never become desensitized to.
Right.
There are few things from my career that I can't. I won't. I'm not desensitized. No matter how desensitized I am to a lot of things, there are certain things that I'm just not.
Right. Things that'll trigger you through your career.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
That just don't go away. And that's when you have to be able to manage that personally, whether it's seeking professional help or, as my colleagues here say, is leaning into your hobbies. I like to go out for a run. You run for 5 miles, and by the time you're done, you're so tired you don't want to think about anything else. You just want to think about rolling out and having some cold water.
Yeah, I want to add something to that. For that reason, it's very important when you have the support of your family. because in your case, I'm sure that family members know very well what you do, and they know when you're tired, but they also know when you need that support. So in my case, I moved here by myself. All my family, they live in Puerto Rico. So you can imagine, for me, it's a phone call. But if I have to call them and I have to mention to them, this is what happened today, this is how I feel today, honestly, my mom, every day, she knows everything about what happened in news in New York, because I mentioned to her, but also because I mentioned to her how I feel, what I did. She's very supportive. I'm giving to you the example because family members play an important role in that.
I want to make a few notes on that. Number one, I'm really glad to hear this kind of conversation happening. I was a reporter at the New York Daily News for 6 years, right out of my time in college. I did an internship in my senior year, my last semester, and it was a very unforgiving environment. And we were working on a per diem rate, so we were not full-time employees, not getting health benefits. And we were sent all around New York City on accidents and crimes and lots of stories that were pretty gory. And we were really driven hard by editors who would be calling us for updates. Why didn't you get there? You need to get this sooner. There was not the kind of conversations that, you were talking about, which I think is wonderful that's happening now, but there wasn't like the kind of check-ins. There was sort of more like, can't you handle it? This is New York City. This is a breaking news business. And so I love that there's actually that environment and that support culture, and an understanding that if we don't maintain our sensitivity to those topics, how can we relate to audiences who are going to be, right? And then we come across as callous because, and I'm sure the kind of jokes that are made in newsrooms at times about like things, because you're covering it so frequently that sometimes is like a defense mechanism or whatever, we just start like joking about it. And then you take a step back like, oh my gosh, what are we like joking about here? Some of these topics. I also just want to transition from that into and ask all of you about the value of networking organizations that can lend support. So obviously we're here today as a Society Professional Journalist chapter sponsoring it. I talked to students about National Association for Hispanic Journalists and all these other sorts of great organizations. I think David was talking about IRE, Investigative Reporters and Editors. We actually just came back from an SBJ conference. We were in Boston this past weekend. Susmita was there with us. But yeah, does that help create a culture where you have support of other people going through some of these same things? And I don't know, have any of you been involved in those kinds of organizations before?
I have to a limited degree, National Association of Hispanic Journalists. I went to a couple of their conventions when I was early on in my career. The networking is important. The business is very, very small. It's amazing how many people know each other in this business. So I think it's important.
Yeah, and I mean, having people doing the same thing that you do that can relate is always super important as well. Because I know working in a newsroom is very different from, and I'll use myself as an example. Most of my friends are teachers. So whenever I have to tell them about a hard day in a newsroom or a tough employee conversation I had to have, they can't really relate because they were teaching English to fifth graders. They're like, sorry, Anna, but I'm sure you handled it well. So having that network of people that do the same thing that you do and can share those experiences goes a really long way, because not only are they there to support you, they can offer you guidance, offer creative solutions for any troubles you have. So I think, yes, absolutely, having that network is important for the personal factor, but also, like John G. said, to get to know others in the industry, because as big as we think the media industry is, it's actually very small.
Yep.
Well, networking opens a lot of doors, and I will say that because, for example, when I started on TV back in 2002, I had the opportunity to be part of different organizations, right? And now I understand how important it was, right? For example, today, even when we're here in New York, but sometimes we fly to Puerto Rico to do some coverage, the only thing that I have to do is just make a phone call and the governor will be available for us. That's something that I really appreciate, because I've been building those contacts, I've been working that networking since I started my career. So same thing in Miami. I spent 8 years in Miami. So sometimes my colleagues ask to me, how do you understood the network in Miami? It's very different in comparison to here in New York, right? So I navigate through that, and I have a lot of contact. But besides that, they become part of your family. Because I don't know if the same thing happened to you guys. You know, colleagues, people who are part of that process, at the end of the day, they become friends.
Mm-hmm.
So, and also here in New York, now I'm part of the IRE. So I mentioned this because in 2022, I went to IRE in Colorado, and I've been working this story about cannabis in New York, right? And I had a lot of information, a lot of contacts during that summit. When I came back here to New York, I put everything together. Also, we did an investigation about illegal sale of marijuana in New York. So it is a learning process, but you have to be ready to build, right, your own, let me say, your own group of contacts.
It goes so much, though. I mean, there's no absolutes, and the more you network, the better off ultimately you're going to be, but you got to know what you're doing, right? So, again, early on in my career, somebody said something to me that has stuck with me for many, many years. And again, there's no absolutes, but what they said to me is like, who you know gets you in the door, but what you know keeps you in the door. So
that's wonderful. I think, obviously for all of you, it's great to have these networking organizations so that you can find the internships and jobs. I've also just found the support that I get from places like SPJ when we are all going to go through tough times, and that could be, so many of our guest speakers have been laid off, and they talk about that experience. But whatever it could be that you're going through personally, to then have this group of people, like Ana was saying before, there's not like, I remember growing up talking about journalism, like my parents or my family, none of them had been journalists. So like you were talking about teachers, like, so they might say like they could be supportive, but yeah, very generally. And they don't understand the idea of like, why do I have to work on Thanksgiving and Christmas? And why am I not, coming home late or, or asking these kinds of questions that sometimes can seem hostile to like, politicians or whatever. So like having other people who've been through that training, and I've just made so many great friends through those kinds of groups. That's why, and obviously I'm a pitchman here for our SPJ chapter. So I'm trying to get that going. Yeah. So we'll start to wrap up. Any final questions that anybody would like to get in who hasn't had a chance to speak yet? Or thoughts that you'd like to share? No. So then, yeah, maybe we should end. And you've given us all great advice today, so thank you for that. But is there any other words of wisdom you'd like to leave with this group? We have a lot of people here who are going to be graduating very soon, next month. They're in the throes of final exams and projects and all of that right now, which we've all experienced different times. But any other maybe aspirational goals, things for them to consider as they're finishing their college journey and about to embark on a professional career?
Stay open and dynamic. Changes abound, and go with change. Far too, and I see it today. I mean, far too often, people are scared of change, and it's the one thing everybody's like, oh my God, and nobody likes change. Embrace it. Embrace it, because it's going to change your career.
Yeah, I would say don't say no. If you see an opportunity that maybe you're a little unsure of, but you think, oh, this is going to get me into the door and I'm going to learn, never say no. And once you're in that job, if somebody is giving you a stretch assignment or they're asking you to learn something else, never say no, because you never know where it's going to take you. You think that one day this is your goal here, but then once you're in the door, it takes you this way, and that's how you end up as the VP of Technology for WPSPJ and JU. And I will also say follow us on LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn, and I put a lot of freelance opportunities there as well. You can always go on to nbcunicareers.com for the staff positions, but anything that's part-time, freelance, daily hire, I always make sure to post on my personal page, on the WNJU page, and the WNBC page. So make sure you're following us.
Well, my recommendation and my advice is When you're a journalist, you have to know a little bit about everything. That's really important. I never imagined that I have to be ready to understand about health. And during the pandemic, I was in front of the camera, doing translation of the press conferences, and also trying to explain to the people, to our community, Spanish speaker, what's going on. That's very important. So in life, you have to be ready for the next. You have to be focused, as I mentioned before, and you have to follow your instinct. Just go for it. If that's your goal, fight for that. I came from a very humble family in Puerto Rico, in the mountains of Puerto Rico. Actually, I was the first one who graduated from college at home. So I become the inspiration to I've been inspiration for my family, but at the same time, they are proud of that, but at the same time, it was a sacrifice. So I understand perfectly what it means to be part of a minority sometimes, but if you want to follow your dream, you never stop. You should never stop. So go for it.
Thank you. You have to learn everything. For example, I don't understand sports, so I have to learn about sports to all other subjects and criteria, all the topics.
I would say the same way. I'm a Yankee fan. But for example, when I was working in Miami, one of my first assignments was this coverage about basketball, about the Heat. I mean, Heat is not only Miami Heat; they're not only a team in Miami. That's part of their culture. So same thing with the Marlins from baseball. So I will mention this. The good thing is that in the newsroom we have a lot of people who, for example, we have Veronica, and she's our anchor who do sports. So, and they're always able to teach you, to make you understand what you need to understand. That's the reason I'm mentioning. You have to know a little bit about everything, but if you don't know, ask. They're always, the good thing that we are a team, right? In our newsroom, everyone help each other. And never be afraid to ask questions. If you don't know anything, ask about that. And I'm sure that you will receive the assistance that you need and the guidance.
And I'd say lean into podcasts. That's what keeps me in the know. So like David says, we work with so many people, and as you know, the HR manager, I want to make sure that I can connect with everybody. So that means I need to know a little bit about everything. So when I know my avid sports fan is walking about, I can tell him, have a quick conversation about last night's game, or some of my employees are parents. I can tell them a little bit about what I heard. So I like to listen to Up First on NPR. It'll tell you like the 3 big stories of the day. So when I'm in the newsroom, I'm not lost. I like the Journal because they go into specific things. I could tell you all about Bitcoin. It doesn't really mean anything in HR, but if one of my employees sat down and asked me how I felt about it, I'm like, I'll tell you what I think about Sam Bankman-Fried. But I only know that because I listened to the 15-minute episode of their Journal. So it really is just getting, education from different places, and you don't have to be an expert on anything. But if you know just this much, it opens up a whole conversation, and you can say, oh, I heard that, but could you explain it to me? And now you already created a bond with somebody, and you have that connection. And you'd be surprised. Maybe you are interested in Bitcoin and you're going to go Google it afterwards. But it's just staying in the know and, always learning.
I mean, know where to look and at least be willing to research. And I'll speak on the technology side, right? So I don't think anybody's going to expect anyone to know everything about everything. It's just impossible. But at least know who to ask, have that network, right? Know who to ask or know where to find the information. I mean, we live in an age where information is a fingertip away, right? It's incredible what you can find out. I was having this conversation earlier today when I got here. Is I built a control room system a couple of weeks, about a month ago, from 2 days of YouTube videos. I didn't know how the system worked. My entire weekend was spent, because I was interested in it, learning it from YouTube videos. Come Monday, I built the thing. So the information is there. You just got to know where to look for it and got to want to look for it.
Yeah.
Just now, like we have learned website building, website making, we have to learn because it's been our syllabus and deadline. So we have now learned how to make a website. That's awesome. Yeah, there it is.
I'm a certified YouTube shade tree mechanic.
And they're also involved in making a podcast. Susmita and Andrew we have a podcast for our own SPJ chapter. We're the first student chapter in the country to have one. So cool. And it's all interviews with professionals like yourselves when we either host them for these kinds of guest speaking events or we go on newsroom tours. And we get advice from them and then put it out there for a community of young journalists everywhere who could potentially advantage from it.
That's great.
So practicing those sorts of skills that they're learning. But it sounds, and just to go back to what you said at the beginning, John, that drive is ultimately what you're looking for, right?
100%.
So that it never second guessing where we went to school or what, our background. Like my family was not journalists. They weren't like well off or anything like that. And hopefully someone along the way, a mentor, will see something in you and help guide you. And if you just if you really believe in journalism as a public service, as something where you could really help a lot of people. And I think even though maybe not well paying, it's very rewarding. And it's important, right? How many people can say that their profession is protected by the First Amendment? I mean, that's something that is always so powerful to me. And to think that that's, because even the founders of our country realized it's really critical that we keep this watchdog function. So thank you so much for you all being here today. We really appreciate you coming back.
Thank you for having us.
If anybody has questions that you'd like to come up, maybe they could talk one-on-one a little bit. Yeah, that'd be great.
Thank you.
Thank you.